Max El-Hag here. On this episode of the Corpus Animus podcast, I try to give all my thoughts on what's happening in the CrossFit world right now. That runs from Greg Glassman to Dave Castro to the sport of CrossFit to the affiliates. Chris is here with me. It's kind of a diatribe that I know could potentially sound like complaining. And for me, I don't really necessarily like people that complain, but what I wanted to do was start a dialogue and provide some constructive criticism on things that I've seen in my tenure in the sport and community of CrossFit. So I hope that you enjoy listening, and I hope this can be a starting point for us creating a better community moving forward. If you're on the go and you want to listen to just the audio version, subscribe to the Corpus Animus podcast on your favorite podcast app.
All right, so I just came back from a 2-day trip. You said you wanted to film a video. You had some thoughts?
Yes, I do.
Well, I've got the camera rolling.
All right.
I've got the audio rolling.
All right. So, I mean, the thoughts really are just revolving around CrossFit, the information about Greg Glassman.
Pull that mic down so it's like facing your, aim it down like that. Oh, yeah, there you go. Yep. Our viewers will thank you.
All right. So CrossFit, Greg Glassman information, Castro taking over as the CEO, what's going on with the sport, athlete unionization. I'm going to try to cover all of that in one video that's quasi-narrative based. I'll kind of tell the story of how I got into CrossFit, what it means to me, what I think needs to change with regards to the sports structure, the affiliation structure, and then you can kind of just jump in if I get dull.
I'm going to mostly just try to shut up. But.
Okay. But if there's something that needs clarification, then just jump in. So starting with training think tank, my involvement with CrossFit. So it started in 2009. I was training with American Top Team, doing primarily no-gi jiu-jitsu competitions and doing a little bit of fight training and MMA. Guy who owned an early affiliate, my friend Dave Hochberg, he owned CrossFit Delray Beach. He comes in, he starts talking to Charles McCarthy, who ran that specific school of American Top Team. They pointed me out. They said, hey, do you want to do some of your conditioning? There's this thing called CrossFit. So I went over there. I did Fight Gone Bad. They decided they wanted to increase the weight to 95 pounds, make it a little bit more difficult. And then that was like the hook point. I just was immediately into CrossFit right away. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, I think I slowly started falling in love with the aspect of CrossFit and the ideology behind competing in CrossFit and the fact that people were doing that more than I was in combat sports, even though I was probably much better at combat sports. I just loved whatever the intensity and community that was getting involved in CrossFit. So that started an athlete obsession with CrossFit. I eventually competed on a team in 2010 in the games in CrossFit, then went as an individual.
Where'd you place?
I think we finished 18th,
oh,
19th. Yeah, not that high.
Why even bring it up? So anyway.
Not high enough. Then I tried an individual run and then went to regionals in the Southeast in 2011, competed there. And that was really the hurrah of my athletic career in CrossFit. Shortly after that, I got recruited by James Fitzgerald, who won the first CrossFit Games and at the time was doing research on CrossFit athletes, to go there and help him in the research project and write programs for people that were competing in competitive CrossFit that wanted to make the games. I programmed for a ton of people that were games level at the time and did research on them. We did lactate testing, heart rate testing. We just pretty much did everything we possibly could to understand what was going on in the inside of CrossFit athletes' bodies. After leaving there, I started training Think Tank, and that was kind of the coaching process and working with Travis and Will and Noah and a bunch of high-level athletes and basically becoming a little bit more known as a coach in the elite sector of the sport. But really all of that time, I was doing a bunch of education on how do you program design for the sport? How do you organize Metcons in a way that promotes longevity? How do you try to scale things appropriately for people that aren't competitive? So there's kind of been this whole evolution of being athlete, researcher, coach, educator. And then last year, or this year actually in March, I decided that I wanted to actually affiliate my business. So I had my level 1 in 2009. And then I let it expire because I was like, well, I'm not really working in a CrossFit gym anymore. We were training Think Tank was housed inside CrossFit Passion. So we had the affiliate to be able to do the opens. I didn't really need it. I didn't really see any justification.
And that's Travis Mayer's gym for those who.
Travis Mayer. Yeah.
Maybe you've heard of him. He's a dude and a friend.
A friend to everyone.
To everyone.
Yeah. I decided there were things in the world of CrossFit that I wanted to change. I wanted to make a bigger impact. I wanted to be able to upgrade the educational system. And one of the things that I wanted to do was actually be a part of it. So I decided to affiliate my business so that I could do a better job of legally being able to say like, hey, we're going to work on coaching CrossFit, teaching all of the nuanced components of what you would do from a program perspective to actually help people aspire to the philosophies that embed their methodology. Because I thought there was kind of a knowledge gap. There's like, all right, there's this beautiful philosophy, but then how do you actually apply training to make a human body capable of doing that? Ironically, that happened. Then the pandemic hit, and then all of this stuff happened. So I've pretty much been involved in CrossFit from like every capacity. I've been a coach inside of a CrossFit gym running group classes. I've done personal training and technical work. I've written programs for regular people that wanted to get fit, that love CrossFit, people that like Noah, who took second at the game. So I've kind of run the full gamut. I still do CrossFit and still do the open.
And during that time, you've coached regular people.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that kind of means that my opinion is really a summation of opinions that I've heard from people all over the world that own affiliates. Some of them are competitive based gyms. Some of them are just like, you know, they want to train people to just generally be fit and have nothing to do with competition, and really have heard people's perspectives on the whole spectrum of CrossFit. So that's kind of my background, what Training Think Tank is with regards to CrossFit. And what I see from an issue perspective are kind of the topics that I want to cover. There's really three of them. First is the racism issue. I think that was really the catalyst for sparking the entire, like, let's make a change type thing. I know Noah pulled out of the games with Chandler at the same time, and then Travis, and then there was like the athlete union discussion and what was going to happen. So there's the first
And what
thing.
is that for people who don't know? What's the athlete union discussion?
There's been discussions that like, there should be an athlete union, like a collective players or a collective bargaining agreement. Like all of the NFL players have a group that represents the athletes to be able to make sure that there's fair compensation, athlete safety is taken into consideration in this sport, like workout safety, judging standards, appeals processes, just all of that stuff.
And this is something you've been pitching or wishing would be happening long before this ever was.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, all the issues that I'm going to cover is really like, this is stuff that I've wanted to try to make an impact on for years. It's just like, I didn't really say anything because I didn't really have a place to say anything.
I mean, we have a few videos where you brought it up, but not on this scale.
Yeah, and not in depth where I'm just like purely speaking to the issue. So first would be racism. Second would be the sport itself. And then the third would be the affiliate structure. Going through all those, what I think that it all ties down to is really leadership, and poor leadership specifically, or poor communication. We can tie it to Glassman, and we can say like, all right, the issue he got blasted for, the post that he made, the COVID-19 or Floyd-19 post, was just culturally insensitive and just seems like a stupid decision to make, to post something like that publicly as the leader of an organization that has a ton of representation of people from those cultures that are mourning something. So it just seems like a stupid decision, but that's not really the major crux of the issue. That was more of like the tip of the iceberg of things that have been going on from Greg Glassman almost since the beginning of CrossFit's popularity.
Yeah, he's a controversial dude.
Yeah, very controversial figure. So the first thing is excommunicating people that were in the culture, that were contributing to the knowledge of the collective group of CrossFit affiliates. So some people, like, I went to work for James Fitzgerald. He had won the CrossFit Games. He was definitely making a positive contribution to the knowledge base about how to train people, how to think about physiology, and how to break down what's happening inside the body when we're doing CrossFit. So he's one. Rob Wolf was another one that was promoting paleo nutrition and saying like the zone diet's going to underfeed people if they're doing competitive CrossFit. And we potentially need to think about there being more individualization with regards to nutrition, which combated what they were teaching in the level 1. So another person got kicked out. There was the CrossFit Kids group that got kicked out. Greg Everett with Catalyst Athletics. So there's been a number of people that have been silenced and kicked out of the community.
We got kicked out. I did.
Oh yeah, Barbara shrugged. Yeah. So that's just one issue. I mean, we're supposed to be a culture and a community of people that are forward thinking and trying to collectively bring in the group of most knowledgeable experts from all the individual disciplines of physical culture and molding that together to create a philosophy on how to create GPP or some broad general fitness. So first trigger for me is like, well, if you're cutting people out that are disagreeing with your opinion about that, you're like obviously not in support of what the philosophy of knowledge sharing is all about. So that'd be one. Second would be completely cutting the funding for the CrossFit Games and firing the media staff on no notice. Like that happened, bam. And everybody was like, all right, well, we have nothing to do, no recourse. There's no board. There's no one to talk to. It's his decision. There was talks that potentially the games wasn't going to happen. So like, to me, that seems like poor leadership on a bunch of fronts. First is there are a ton of affiliates. Maybe the affiliate model of CrossFit Health is a bigger priority to them, but there are a bunch of affiliates, Travis's being one of them, that have people that are very invested in the sport and whose investment in the sport has actually led to the thriving of their affiliations. Rich Froning would be another one. Like anybody who is both athlete and coach representing the affiliate is basically like, well, you're no longer important to us. It's obviously like making a determination as a leader that a huge portion of your following of your affiliate network is no longer important because you think something else is important. To me, like that's a poor leadership decision. Constant threats of litigation to silence people. I know that the dude Andy Stump put a podcast out and had made claims, and I don't know about like the truth of any of this. I wasn't part of any of the inner community of what was going on at the top level of HQ, but one of the major things he said is he's probably going to get sued for being able to, just for voicing his opinion. And that was a very, very commonly held thing, is like, don't dissent and don't say anything bad about CrossFit because they'll come after you. They have a huge media team or a huge legal team to go after you. And like that again is a very like dictatorial way of leading to basically control people with fear and can kind of control the narrative of what you want your organization to represent instead of letting a cultural representation take place of the entire community's belief systems. The racist comment, obviously, about George Floyd. The email that I read from one of the affiliates who decided to pull out because of that, and his response back was just like, to me, it was just cruel. Like the actual words used in it, I'm like, man, who's publishing this and who's writing that down and thinking it's a good idea to send something in writing that's just so mean. It's like purely as a humanity or as somebody who's thinking about humanity itself, having somebody like that representing the entire brand and in control of the whole ecosystem, to me is like, that just doesn't seem like a good idea. And then obviously the sex allegations and treatment of women, if that stuff is true and there are people at HQ that eventually come out and expose what was actually going down, I think it's pretty clear that there is going to be a big group of affiliates, a very large group of affiliates and athletes that don't want him specifically in representation of the brand of CrossFit. So I think him being pushed out is good. He stepped down as CEO, which is good, but I don't think it's good enough because it's happened before. And Jeff Kane, I think, stepped in as the CEO and then he was kicked out. Glassman stepped back in. So there's nothing to say like, well, he's not going to just do that whole thing again. He's doing this as a PR campaign. And then all of a sudden he decides he wants to come back and be in control of what he perceives of as his creation. And then potentially leads us as a community into a place where we don't necessarily want to go. So I don't necessarily think that what's been done has been good enough for making some clear and radical changes about where we need to go as an organization. And I
training think tank or CrossFit?
No. Well, I meant CrossFit as an organization or the training think tank as a community, and our affiliation and participation in that community. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So I think there's probably going to be some demands from people from the affiliate network that he relinquishes control. Like I don't really care personally if he had full financial stake, if he was 100% financial owner and got all the money and the profits that were created from CrossFit, but having any sort of decision-making control for me is just a major liability. It's like you have a track record of, over a decade of making decisions that huge portions of your community disagreed with. And now this is the first time that it's actually impacted the bottom line, but it's not the first time that there's been a huge amount of people that are really not happy with what's going on from a headquarters perspective. And I think it would be a good thing to figure out a way to ensure that that doesn't happen again. Another reason why I don't think the changes of just having Castro be the person that's taking over as CEO in place is, I don't know, again, I'm talking about people that I don't really know personally, but from what I've seen of Dave Castro, he's been amazing for the growth of the sport. He's been a really good controversial figure. What do they call it in WWE? A heel?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's really done that for CrossFit. A ton of people, I think, watched the open announcements and like the whole drama unfold because part of it was his character in the whole process. However, I've been involved in the sport at a pretty high level. I mean, I coached a dude who took second in the sport and have coached a ton of games athletes. And every year there's always been things that a majority of the coaches, a lot of the coaches that are in the media, in the inner circle, the biggest names in the sport are really unhappy with and have voiced criticisms. And none of that criticism was ever heard or ever taken into consideration. It was almost like, well, if you don't like it, go fuck yourself type attitude. That's not what was actually said, but there's no process for being able to report that. So it's like, that's number one. Second, if you're the number two person in charge, and let's just say there's some bad stuff going on at HQ, or, Glassman's a bad person and he's doing this, then it's really hard to believe that there is no collusion or being aware of what was going on. So it's like, all right, well, you're taking the number two person in charge that was aware and saw all of this stuff going down.
Was he the number two?
I don't know. I mean, he was the head of training and he was the head of the games from what I know. But again, this comes down to communication and like who's in charge, what's the hierarchy, who's making decisions, what's the mission statement of the games, what's the mission statement of the affiliate network. A lot of that stuff was never disseminated out. There's no head of PR. Like there's nothing for us to have any clear understanding. So that's just my assumption from looking at the outside. Fraternization with athletes and playing favoritism. So like, been fist bumping athletes and stuff. And then there's the like publicly talking smack to Patrick Vellner and basically calling him a baby about voicing his concerns. I just think of it like a level of professionalism. I don't see the commissioner of the NBA going out and like, publicly criticizing one of the players as a way to be able to like get people in line or justify the decisions and the rule books and the way that they do business. To me, it's not really the way to create a professional facing sport that has some sense of legitimacy. So for me, while I want to give Dave Castro a chance to prove that he can crush it and that he's going to make these changes, there's part of
as
CEO and whatever his role will be in the games. I know they said Justin Berg is going to take over as head of the games, but I don't know if that would be the change that we're all looking for if we're truly looking for some sense of change. It's like, all right, well, Glassman's now the full owner still.
So you're a little skeptical, but are you willing to give him a chance is what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. We'll get a little deeper.
You'll let the new chapter play out.
Yeah. I'm not going to make any radical decisions right now because I don't really know what's going to happen. But to me, I just don't really think that that's the change that I'm looking for. I'm looking to see like, all right, well, if he's in place, let's see what actual changes come as a result of that. And to me, I think that this awakening, just like everybody kind of getting on the same page of being unhappy and voicing the concerns and banding together and showing the power of the collective community to make change, is an opportunity for us to demand, hey, this is what we want for the community. So me digging into that, I have some things that I think need to happen. And again, they're just, for me, it's more just me sharing my ideas. So my participation as an affiliate in the network is essentially saying like, hey, I value CrossFit. I want to give them power. I want to give them some sense of my attention and a place in the market of fitness. So I do that by paying them money and showing up in their events and talking about them on my podcast. If I'm going to continue to do that, I want to make sure that those things are in alignment with what Training Think Tank's vision is as a training organization. Up until this point, I didn't really think that was the case. I did my affiliation so I could try to make the changes from the inside. Now it's almost becoming like a liability to be a CrossFit affiliate because of the reputational damage that you're taking.
someone told me that an Uber driver came up to Travis
For sure.
to deliver food and said, "Are you the racist CEO?"
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. And
because you get the regular public, the regular
know.
person 9 to 5er that doesn't train at all, they don't even know that CrossFit has affiliates. They just they pulled up to a gym that said CrossFit and they maybe read a headline and thought
Travis is like, no, that's not how businesses work. So it's just and if you Google CrossFit right now, the top, like the little news pop-up thing is CrossFit tries to add diversity after racist CEO's comments.
I just went out of town on a family 2-day trip thing with my whole extended family. And for the first time ever talking about work, they'd be like, wait, you still doing what, because it's been 10 years of doing this. Yeah. You still do it. And for the first time, I almost hesitated to use the word CrossFit because I know that it's all on the news and I don't even want to go down that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
not that I care, but it doesn't matter. But I never had to think about it
before that.
Right.
Yeah. So the issues, first, racism and diversity. So the comment, in my opinion, was insensitive. It was poorly timed. It shows some level of disconnection that he has to the culture, just in general, and maybe like pop culture itself. Does this make him a racist human? I'm not really sure, and I'm more prone.
I doubt it. I think he's just an equal opportunity asshole.
Yeah. I mean, that would be my guess as well. But I think that issue is much bigger than CrossFit. It's not a CrossFit issue, and it's playing out in the NBA, in the NFL, protests in the street. So, like, I don't see training think tanks place as making a major statement there, but I did use it as an opportunity for self-reflection to say, like, all right, well, this is going on. I could probably do a better job of cultivating diversity in my own brand and making sure that I create opportunities for underprivileged people. And there are things that I want to do to make a change, but it's not necessarily that I think CrossFit is a systemically racist organization that needs to be like totally overhauled because of that. So I don't want to go too deep on the racism topic. I would look to some of the Black people in our culture, like Elijah Muhammad or Chandler Smith or Elizabeth Akinwale, and some of the people that actually may have more intelligent and personal things to say on the issue than I would have.
Yeah, you're just the token
token
Arab guy.
Yeah, Arab white guy, whatever I am. All right, so that's first. With regards to change, I don't really know what that would look like. I know they put their initiative out to create a more diverse CrossFit culture, but I honestly think that a lot of the people that were upset about this issue and have almost lost sight of that, and it's become more about the other aspects of CrossFit anyways, which makes me think that there was a lot of just bubbling tension and upset about how this organization was run and communicated.
This was just like it was both for sure, but this was just like oh shit, we finally got something where we know we can get this clown out of here.
Yeah, I think.
It's almost a disservice to act like it was all, which I'm sure it was, but Yeah. There was more stuff. Like
there's more.
If he was a great guy this whole time, I don't.
And
he just had one little slip. I doubt this would be as crazy.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely something to just a history of poor humanitarian actions.
Yeah.
All right. So second is the sport. So there's a quote: "Sport has the power to change the world."
This is your favorite quote. This has been your quote for years. So this isn't.
It's not just culturally relevant to my topic.
All this happens, and then you go search for the Nelson Mandela quote.
No.
Hey, let me get that. Yeah.
A sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. And it's a Nelson Mandela quote, relevant because he ended apartheid and ultimately became the president of South Africa. But I think in the CrossFit space, I don't think people, maybe Glassman too, just based on his complete disregard for the sport last year, realize how many CrossFit gyms were thriving because people were inspired by CrossFit being on ESPN and the culture of the sport. When you go to something like Wadapalooza or the CrossFit Games, those were like amazing.
It's the only reason I got into this.
They were just
watching Miko.
Yeah, they were just amazing human beings, amazing cultures, amazing fans. And I think that inspired people to be better physically, to aspire to what the ideal was. It was like, all right, well, here's this philosophy of CrossFit of being able to do anything and everything at the highest potential level and express capacity. Now, here's a human that holds that ideal, look what they can do. And that inspired people to be better physically. And we get better physically around sports. Like the entire aesthetic revolution in the fitness culture was built by Arnold Schwarzenegger, pretty much, who was in the sport of bodybuilding. And then it became a fitness movement. I think the sport of CrossFit ultimately started to grow and proliferate, the movement of CrossFit being something as a fitness tool. So it's been an awesome ride even for myself, but I think there are a ton of things from the outside that I've heard from sponsors, my other coaches, athletes that I've coached, that I think we all would like to see changed in whatever the new wave of the sport is. And truth be told, go ahead.
No, sorry.
I'm not even sure that the sport itself requires CrossFit or the name of CrossFit. So some of this information is like, hey, if you're CrossFit, you might want to consider taking a lead role in doing some of this stuff to get your athletes and your sponsors and stuff on board and actually show that you are making change because
I mean, it's almost like WWE had, for non-wrestling fans, WWE's the big dog and always has been, but then they just had AEW, a young upstart, come in and they're taking their lunch money right now. I mean, it's not putting them out of business or nothing, but it's definitely creating opportunities and it's really helping the athletes. And that it looks like that same thing might be similar happen.
It seems like there's stuff that's going to be happening for sure.
Well, I was, when you just said, go ahead. And I said, you go ahead was the other, 2 weeks ago or before all this happened. So maybe a month ago, we had filmed an episode of this podcast talking about, changes to rules, or what was the topic?
Oh man,
yeah, with Adam.
Me, Adam, and Kyle sat down and we talked about changes we'd like to see in the sport of CrossFit.
Yes, and then my dumbass
lost the audio.
Well,
so good timing.
But, I mean, had we put it out, maybe it would have been cool to say, "Look, we were already talking about this stuff." Yeah. But now we have better stuff we could talk about.
Yeah, and I did take most of the list of stuff.
And we might still do that episode.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so the first thing is, like, I think there needs to be some sort of communication from CrossFit HQ about what the sport means to them. Like, is the sport primarily a money thing? Like, we know that 400,000 people participating in the Open at $20 a pop is a relatively large amount of money. So it's like, it could just be like, hey, we want global participation in the sport because it pays the bottom line and it's about participation and that's how the workouts are created and why we do the Open. Or is it about finding the fittest? Is it about cultivating a longer term sport? Is it about cultivating teens and masters? Is it about
no?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to those questions based on actions would be that simple. But I do think that there might be, hey, if we sit down and we really think, how can this connect us to the affiliate network and improve the affiliates' recognition so that somebody just on the streets looks at CrossFit and sees it as something positive and sees it as an opportunity for them to get more fit? Having some baseline communication from the authority about what the sport means to the organization and what they're trying to do helps all of the other people, the players, the affiliate network, try to share that communication. So without any lines of communication, it's like we're just left completely in the dark and we don't know anything about schedules, timelines, rules. So some of the things that I think from a communications standpoint need to be changed is first, some sort of testing and program design review. So Castro's pretty much been in charge of the games. I don't know who's involved in that team. The way that it seems and the way that from his book that I read, Constructing the CrossFit Games, seems like a pretty one-man show. Like he was in charge of it and there might be other people that helping to like test the workouts and be somewhat involved, but he's primarily the person. Having a structure, whether it's multiple coaches, whether it's multiple athletes, whether it's a coaches union, an athlete union, a representation, a board, a group of people being able to look at the tests and say, are we doing a service to the philosophies and to the tests by constructing these tests? And just one example, statistics from 2011 to 2015. That's 5 CrossFit seasons, Open, regionals, and the games. Muscle ups, bar or ring, were tested 17 times. 7 times at the games, 5 times at regionals, 5 times in the Open. So that means over the course of 5 years of testing to find the fittest person on earth, you need to test 3 times per year or more than that on average to find the fittest human in a sport that is supposed to test broad, general, and varied movement testing. Like, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And I know there'd be some argument of being like, well, some of it was in the open, and then some of it was in the regional, and then some of it was in the games. Yeah, but statistically speaking, if you put muscle ups in the open, the person who's in the open is getting a relative advantage in the open, and you can have those points carry through and then create a more varied subset of tests. Now, I'm not saying I have the answer to these things. I'm just saying that they're worth having a discussion if you're saying that these tests are the tests that are going to dictate the fittest on earth. And up until this point, there's been none of that. There's been lanes in the open that are in the games that are clearly faster than other lanes, where all of the fastest times are coming from some lanes. And then people bring that up and you're just chastised for it, instead of it being like, hey, we're going to have an open and honest conversation about, hey, maybe we messed up. Maybe we put these big fans that were like spraying water that created a little bit of slickness. We didn't know. That's our bad. Moving forward, we're going to do a little bit of a better logistical job to try to think about the physics of the lane, instead of stop complaining. You don't know what you're talking about. We're right, which is pretty much the narrative that has been.
And that's coming from a guy who had an athlete in the fast lane.
Sure. I mean, I know that I've had athletes that have taken advantage of some of those things, and some of it is just like sport. Like, if you show up to a golf tournament and you play in the morning and it's really windy, and then somebody comes in the evening and the wind dies down and it's a beautiful weather day, that's not factored in the leaderboard. It's just, it is what it is. However, there's a discussion about all of that, and you know that ahead of time.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy is we just got 2 of those assault runners on site. We have 2, 1, 2.
Yeah.
And they're different.
Yeah.
And how fast they go.
For sure.
So you're right. You're like, man, I ran an 800 this fast on. And so if there's 20 of them at the games, how different are each one?
Yeah. And so you have that, you have 10 lanes and you have these machines. What happens if you're in a lane and your machine just dies, or the battery dies? There's no backup lane. There's no other place to go. Like, none of these issues have been major issues.
Right.
There was one in the East Regionals where they were, instead of actually having backup assault runners, they were counting the little white strips as they went. And it just happened that those 3 people were finished like top 2 or top 3 in that workout. I'm like, there's no possible way that coincidence is accurate.
So we're going on the random tangents, but your point was to create some sort of board or some sort of
even checking. If it's just a review process, some sort of checks and balances system on the testing and the program design. And then after the thing plays out, there's a group of people that took notes, and then we make forward changes as a sport from year to year to make things better and more equitable for the entire athlete body and for the whole coaching organization and everybody that's involved. The fan experience, just everything about the sport needs to be reviewed. So that'd be number 1. Number 2 would be scoring. So in the open, we have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down relative to where you place. So if you win, you get 1 point. If you take second, you get 2 points. And then all of your scores are added up. And that used to be the scoring system at the games. And then they changed it, and it became the 100 points for first place, 94 for second, 88 for third, where you're basically rewarded more for winning an event and less for doing worse in an event. And it's not like a linear scoring system. Why was that change made? What does that do for the fan experience? Why is that more of a reflection of fitness? Why don't we have some performance-based scoring system that actually says, all right, well, if you finish here and you're the winner and somebody finishes 1/10 of a second behind you, you shouldn't really be awarded that many points more than them, because from a fitness perspective, you actually got a relatively similar score. So something like the decathlon scoring system that aggregates, and Adam created a scoring system.
Yeah, we had a video last year at the games.
Yeah, we actually talked about this. Again,
so basically the point being, the better you do, the better your points shake out.
Yeah, and if somebody finishes, like, there was the
if you win by 2 minutes, the score reflects that you won by 2 minutes.
Yeah, and there was the whole thing, like last year, Noah actually took advantage of the cut system, and he took second place on a workout to Matt Frazier, but he was like a minute and a half behind. Now, before, no one said anything about that. But now, when he is in a position where he's being almost negatively impacted by this arbitrary scoring system, then it's like, okay, well,
when Matt is.
Oh, now I'm going to voice my opinion. But this discussion should happen up front. It's like, here's the scoring system. Here's what the points reflect. This is why we think it's a reflection of fitness. And none of that stuff is really being done and communicated in a way that we understand why the decisions are made, because it actually does change how you have to train an athlete, right? If somebody's like way far off a test, but there's a super outlier, somebody that's really good at something, you're like, oh, well, they're so far away that they're going to win it. And you can just worry about like being close to where the next group of people are.
Right.
Like if somebody's great at barbell cycling and they're winning, like Ben Smith and Matt Frazier and Rich Froning seem to crush those open style barbell cycling workouts at a level that's way higher. But if you're in that next group of elite athletes, you don't really need to strive to catch up to them, because there's not going to be that many people in between you in the scoring system.
And your whole point being that only matters because we are testing for
fitness,
the fittest
person on earth. Yeah. And it's, so the scoring system in my book in my like perspective should be reflective of the characteristic of fitness that the organization is saying.
So either don't say we're testing that and make it just a competition.
Yeah, this is hey, this is a CrossFit competition. Random tests, like it is what it is. It's going to be random every year.
But if you're saying you're testing for the fittest, then it needs to reflect that.
Yeah. And again, it should be communicated. We should have a discussion about it. There should be people that are involved in coaching athletes and in creating workouts for other competitions that get to weigh in on this. And if there was still one person at HQ making those decisions, I would be okay knowing that there was a bunch of people's opinions heard, because sitting in an echo chamber and making a decision on something like that just allows you to get caught up in your own biases so easily. Like I know every time I come up with ideas and I come into our staff meetings and I share them.
Oh, we just shit on you all day.
Shit on my ideas. But that's a good thing for making sure that my own logic is being questioned.
Yeah.
And I think that's necessary.
Happy to do it, sir. Yeah. Happy to do it.
Thank you very much. All right. So that's scoring. Third would be the structure and the nature of seasons. So open being the primary thing that leads to the games, to me, that's such a big problem. Like there is so much cheating that happens, maybe even unknowingly, and it really does impact the leaderboard. You create, generally your first two tests are much more broad and general and inclusive of everybody so that you could get as many people as possible to sign up. Somebody comes in, you got a 20-minute AMRAP.
Let's call him Ricky.
Yeah, Ricky comes in. He does 20.1. He's in a gym. They're doing Friday Night Lights. They don't have enough people and they don't have judges for everyone. And Ricky does the workout and he's like, I think I got 10 rounds on that. Really, Ricky did 8 rounds, but no one's going to question him. And there's no Nest cams and footage on it. He didn't have to film it because he's not actually going to finish in the top 20 of the world. So his videos are probably never going to be seen after 5 weeks. He's not in the top 40. He's in like 300th place or 500th place. However, his score beats a bunch of people who are professional CrossFitters and actually can keep them out of the games after 5 weeks plays out. Yeah. So Ricky comes in and ruins everything. He ruins the party. Now there should be something that counteracts this. And now whether that's some sort of a professional division where all your videos have to be submitted. That seems to make the most sense
to me. Like you can do the other, you could maybe pay, even if you pay a little more to be in the pro division.
Yeah, whatever it is. I think just something that allows for people that invest all of their time and resources into being professional athletes in the sport get treated like such. And then the community that supports those professional athletes doesn't need to be held to the same standard.
Like when we did the quarantine classic,
we had an official leaderboard, which was you posted all of your videos. If not, then you're not part of the official leaderboard.
Yeah, so no, everybody was on the leaderboard, but you were only official if you submitted videos.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Something relatively simple. And you could probably do it by self-policing, having the community self-police. They had something like that at some point where you could thumbs up or thumbs down a video. And if enough thumbs down it goes through a review process, and there could be a judging review board or something. I think there's ways to make sure that happens. So part of the structure.
Oh man. Wow, that's a good idea. The trolling on that shit would be hilarious.
Yeah, it was. I think that's why they got rid of it. Yeah.
Yeah. You just get a whole bunch of angry dudes.
Yeah, for sure. So the open changing or that not being the primary way to make the games, I think would be a good step. And then having some sort of, there used to have, if you won the CrossFit Games, you get a lifetime exemption. Then they got rid of that. I'm assuming partially because like James Fitzgerald was one of the people that had won the games and he wasn't no longer welcome in the community.
Is there any sort of special pass? Like, does it last for a year?
Now, I don't think nothing. But I think there should be, if there's a sport, there should be some sort of power rankings. There should be.
If you got in the top 3 last year, you should get an instant buy into the next
top
one.
10, like whatever it is. If you finish that high in the games,
what does Olympia do? They do something like that, right?
I'm not really sure, but I know there's like tournaments like in the majors in golf. If you're in the top 30 in the world, you get an exemption. So you could come up with some sort of a power ranking system. Now, this isn't something just for the athletes. It's also part of the growth of a sport is creating superstars. Part of the creation of superstars is creating athletes that can have longevity in the sport. Part of having longevity in the sport is being able to pick and choose when you compete throughout the year. Doing a 5-week-long competition in the open where you have to repeat the test 2 or 3 times, then 3 sanctionals that you all have to do a qualifier for, which have 2 other weeks. So there's 11 weeks right there of qualifiers that you have to do. Then the 3 weekends of the sanctionals, then the games. It's just a lot of competing in a sport that is pretty hard on the body. It's a lot of different types of stressors. So if you're going to create a superstar type network, you can have those athletes be like, hey, you've earned a passport to any sanctional that you want to go to. And these are your media obligations or something. You got to show up to one sanctional as mandatory or some sort of a system to be able to encourage an annual season that doesn't just revolve around the games, but it revolves around all of the network of competitions that are either sanctioned or part of a new system, whatever it is. There needs to be something that does that.
And to give the devil his due, because I'm sure that, we're still a young sport, and I'm sure that these are conversations that I hope have came up at HQ, and that it's just slower than we could even ever imagine to get implemented. We're just saying now's the time. Let's use this to do it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, like sanctionals, it was a thing. A lot of people pulled their sanctional affiliations, but like I know that the involvement of HQ with sanctionals was pretty hands off. So different sanctionals paid different amounts of money. The prize purses at those were radically different. The workout construction was basically only overseen to ensure that there was some level of safety. There wasn't any sort of standard like, hey, if you're going to be able to send a representative to the games, you need to be testing this, and this. And I think that's something that needs to happen if we're going to have some sort of a professional sport moving forward. That would also include child development programs. So discussions on if we're creating a teen version of the CrossFit Games, do we really need to be testing all of the same movements at that level? Or should there be different movements that are standard developmental tools for sub-16 athletes so that we could get people into the sport earlier? Doing burpees at 14 years old, probably not that big of a deal. Doing touch and go power snatches and handstand walking and muscle ups at that age, like maybe potentially something that you could do, but maybe also something that might not be safe relative to the normal developmental process and the hormonal process that happens of people going through puberty. And we can have stages like, hey, under 16, this is what's tested, 16 to 20, this is what's tested, 21 and up, you're in the professional division. This would create some sort of a forward sequence for people to be able to start to develop themselves. And that's true for every sport. There's Pop Warner football that leads into high school football, that leads into collegiate football, that leads into the NFL. There's AAU basketball, which leads to high school basketball, which leads to college basketball, which leads to the dark side. So having a system like that for CrossFit would be in our best interest. Having a system for being able to discuss what are appropriate masters scaling options. Like I know that the loads don't really change for athletes. I think it's up until the 55 plus category. So essentially you're biasing. A good masters athlete is essentially somebody that's just strong enough to lift the weights, because that is going to be the primary limitation for so many masters athletes. Now, is that what we actually want to do to cultivate a bigger masters athlete competitor base, and what we think is the most beneficial representation of the ideologies of CrossFit and being broadly fit and testing broad fitness? I'm not really sure. So I think having some sort of a system for child development and master scaling would probably be a good idea. Having coach an athlete representation. Now, this is something that's already going on. I know there's an athlete board that's happening, but I'm not sure what they're advocating or what their demands are. I think there needs to be some sort of discussion on testing, athlete safety, annual planning, uniform prize purses to be at sanctioned events, sponsorships, and what people can wear at these competitions. And all of that stuff is necessary to create a professional system where people are being paid. So that's 3. Number 4 is media. So who's given access? How are we cultivating bigger media contracts? So there was the discussions. I know I listened to Sean Woodland say something. I don't remember when it was. I think it was right after the media team got fired, but that the CrossFit Games was about to sign its biggest contract ever with CBS, and it was going to become the most profitable part of the business of CrossFit HQ, and that's when the rug got pulled out from the CrossFit Games. So that doesn't make sense to me. Like, the whole media team got fired, but then that same media team and all those same people were the media people that were still doing the media for the CrossFit Games and all the competitions. And maybe they're the only people that can, because they're the only people involved in the sport. But I think there needs to be a discussion about how can we create a more unified media source and get more views on this and make it more appealing to an audience and to a fan base, and make it something where we're telling human interest stories, and not every single documentary is about 3 people that are part of the inner circle and doesn't talk about any of the depth of the narrative of all the other people and the gyms that they touch. And maybe that needs to be...
Someone sounds butthurt. Why don't you just get your ass in the inner circle?
Well, we do our own. Yeah, we do our own media. Yeah. And this was the first, or this last year was the first year that we had kind of gotten access to be able to do media. But I think, again...
Yeah, a lot of people did this year. They had the media stuff going on.
For sure, but there should be some sort of discussion about what that process is going to be like to be able to cover sanctionals, to be able to put all of the information out, to be able to share it on whatever the main platform is. If it's CrossFit Games, if they don't have their own media, a sport needs media to grow. So who are the people that are getting promoted and shared? And are we just purely going to do it on YouTube and who becomes most popular? Or are there going to be primary sources you go to, like ESPN and NBC and ABC have media teams?
I feel like that part of it is heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's always going to be an inner circle and there's going to be that kind of stuff. But if I had to say, especially compared to where it used to be.
Yeah. Way more. Yeah. You were part of the...
I wasn't ever part of their stuff.
You were in Barbell Shrugged, which was probably the biggest media organization.
They were friendly with us for a minute, and then it was we got kicked out of everything. If you show up, kick them. There was an email.
All right, so
it's going in the right direction.
Media in the right direction, but it's still something that I think should be a discussion, because I think they need to be the primary outwardly facing communicators about what's going on in the world, which I think they're already doing. Going to Morning Chalk Up or talking Elite Fitness, that's how I get my information about what's going on. So
when I say I think it's going in the right direction, is that the fact that those outlets are starting to exist and they're not shutting them down.
Oh,
so that's good. So I don't even know if you want you want them to do it at some point, but the fact that they're not shutting down all these third party people, and if they are, maybe I just hadn't heard it yet.
Yeah.
But back in the day, they wouldn't allow Morning Chalk Up to do half the stuff they're doing.
They'd be suing.
I don't
or something.
assume. Yeah. I assume it would be more strict.
Yeah. All right. Das Media rule book, clear explanation of penalties.
Clear what?
Clear explanation. Explanation of penalties, enforcement of those penalties, what movements are going to be chosen. I don't know a single sport on the planet that had a major competition go on without a rule book released about how the rules were going to work, except CrossFit. And that happened last year with the major changes. And I think that's a problem. And a lot of the rule book stuff is not applicable to the specific competition. So I think there should be an open specific rule book, a sanctional specific rule book, a game specific rule book where all of the movements that are going to be tested in there and everything that you know you're going to need to do, all of the rules are kind of clearly illustrated out. Now, that might go away from the unknown and unknowable aspect of the sport. So maybe as if CrossFit Games still exists and it becomes the pinnacle event and the rest of the season and all the other events around it kind of wrap around that being the anchor event, maybe that's the one event that gets some sort of hey, you get some sort of creative freedom to be able to have X number of workouts that are all potentially hidden in secret. But if you are going to do that, how are we going to ensure that they are kept secret? There's no people that are actually getting access to those. Who's testing them? Is there a testing team? How is that protected? Is that information getting out to other people that compete? Because there is definitely some inherent favoritism built in to the fact that there are people that are involved in this sport as either athletes or coaches who are also employed by the organization of CrossFit, because it's also a business and there's no like checks and balances protection against that type of stuff. So clear delineated rules of like, this is how it's going to work. And everybody, doesn't matter if you're Matt Frazier, Tia Toomey, or the person who takes last place that you don't know their name, who was a national champion, who finished 50,000th in the world, is going to be applied the same level of penalty for missing a specific rule or not being at a briefing or something like that. So that would be another change. And then an improvement in the drug policy communication would be the last thing. I think if you work on all of that stuff, you can create a professional sport that can be organized moving forward.
And do you think this is something that they don't think about, or?
I don't know. Like, it's hard because part of it is it circles back to the discussion of what's important to CrossFit. So the CrossFit Games before, was it something that was, hey, this is already successful. We don't need it to be any bigger. We already got 400,000 people in the open, which is a huge amount of money that comes up. We already have a ton of people that want to watch it. And this is just okay as it is. We don't care about it being a sport and having developmental stuff and having these athletes be able to make a fair living relative to the amount of work that's putting in. I don't know. They may have been in a position where they're like, everything's good. Or they may have been in a position that they were working on some of this stuff. But based on what I've seen and based on what I've experienced in the arena as a coach, I haven't seen that there's a lot of this stuff is going on in CrossFit. Outside of CrossFit, I do know there are people that are talking about this and trying to do this, but CrossFit owns the name of CrossFit. So then we're in a really shitty, weird position.
Well, that's always been the prime thing. This, before any of this stuff ever happened with Greg, it's always been the at the front. Yeah, it'd be like NBA being
owning NBA. Basketball. Yeah. It'd be like,
you don't play NBA?
Yeah. So it's strange because it's the most noticeable thing to explain
it
what
almost
we do.
Seems
and
like
then
at some point, if it's going to be legit, it has to be separate, but I could be swayed the other way too.
Maybe it is. It's just somebody's going to have to come up with a really good name. Is it going to be like the Functional Fitness Series, the Mixed Modal Fitness Challenge?
Nope.
I mean, like all
Keep
those.
Going.
Yeah. CrossFit was like, it's exactly what it is. It's like a cross-training fitness.
It's almost like you wish
mix.
that word could just be divorced from make them change their I mean, I'm half kidding with that, but it's always been so tricky.
Yeah. So the things I know that are going on, the athlete union, I know that some very, very big named people are all
Travis Mayer. That's the big name.
Yeah. Are all working to do that. I don't think that the athletes are going to be thinking about the sport in terms of how it supports the affiliates and how it supports teens and masters.
Should it?
The athlete union?
Yeah.
No. I think they should just be thinking about whatever their demands are. I mean, they're the athletes. I don't know. Like, they probably want better prize money and like not to feel like they can't complain, and an appeals process. Like, you get a no rep in a workout and it could be a legitimate mistake by the judge, and there's no video review process. You can't go and talk to somebody and get your reps back, get your time back. Like, every other sport has put that in and knows like, well, there's a human error aspect to all looking at things. So if you're in tennis and you're like, oh no, that's not a good call.
What was the thing that happened at regionals where our team woke up and then
Oh yeah,
they went to sleep in fifth place and then woke up.
And then I don't remember. I know it was CrossFit. I'm pretty sure it was CrossFit Balance. I don't even know what happened, but they got to call Dave Castro directly because somebody on their team was associated with him or part of HQ or something, and then their score was changed. And I've been involved in the sport and have had teams in the sport, and I've never even gotten to talk to a head judge or somebody involved to be able to appeal. It's like, oh, you're a coach? No, I can't talk to you. Only your athlete can be talked to. And you're like, all right, whatever. Like, I'm going to follow whatever your rules are because there's no other place I could play this game. But I really disagree with that. I mean, I don't think you should leave it to that athlete should be going and cooling down and doing their work and focus on their next event. And somebody from their support structure should be doing that. And they should just have a process. Or it's like, hey, if the event, this happens in the event, finish the workout immediately after the workout, you go to this head judging station.
Whatever it is, just something that's clear on.
I would guess that's what the athletes kind of would like.
Yes.
All right. So those are the changes for the sport.
Yeah.
All right. Affiliate network.
Hold on.
You better not lose this. No, that's not the one we want. Something else. Give me a good one.
Oh, wait.
It's all right. All right, good enough.
I'm going to update those with different
cool sounds.
Yeah.
All right. Affiliate network. All right, that's the next one. So now I am an actual affiliate. So I pay $3,000 a year to be a part of an affiliate. And
what do you use that for? I mean, you don't have a gym.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a gym, but it's not like
it's
people
not
aren't
like
coming in doing.
Yeah. I mean, and we don't promote that we're doing classes and stuff because like CrossFit Passion is doing that. So it'd be very silly and redundant. Mostly to be able to have our online programs, be able to teach CrossFit training, CrossFit methodology, talk about them, discuss them, use the term legally, like all of the stuff that was a smart business decision. But now, so two stories. The first was the Uber driver coming in and asking Travis if he was the race's CEO. But the bigger one is I went to a golf course recently. I played with a random group of people, and almost inevitably people ask me like, hey, what do you do for a living? I'm like, oh, I run a training business. I try not to really get into it because I don't want to have those types of discussions all the time.
Yeah, prior to all this, it was already hard to have that.
Yeah,
you have have you heard of CrossFit? Blah 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 blah.
So then he pressured. He asked, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I coach most of
How much did he pay you
for training?"
No. He pressured you.
Get a
little something.
Yeah, I did. He's like, so like, what do you train people for? I'm like, oh, have you heard of CrossFit? And he was like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, well, I train people who like want to be competitive in the sports side of CrossFit primarily. Right. And he was like, man, that shit is dangerous. I know so many people that got hurt doing CrossFit. Now that's the primary.
We got a young guy, older guy.
He was an older dude. He was probably in his 50s. And that's a very, very common perspective to have about CrossFit. And I don't think it's completely unjustified. So I know that there's been research about it and there's been the whole lawsuit of people fabricating research studies of people getting hurt. However, I know a lot of people empirically that I've met and encountered with who have been involved in CrossFit facilities who've gotten hurt or come to Training Think Tank broken because they were doing training in a certain way for CrossFit. And then they wanted to kind of get fixed and like, well, I want to compete, but I don't know if I can do this and not get hurt. And some of it, I think, comes down to creating some level of quality control for the entire affiliate network. Now, I got my first level one in 2009. And I remember going through the information and being like, there's some like good stuff in here. There's definitely some stuff to take away. The culture was really cool. I enjoyed the enthusiasm and the competitive side of the actual workouts. There was some novel things that I learned about the positions of the Olympic lifts because that was the first time I'd been exposed to the actual Olympic lifts. I'd been exposed to power cleans and back squats for football, but never actually like, here's a snatch, here's a clean and jerk, other than just kind of what I learned online. But you go through a 2-day certification where you get a couple, some movement education and some education, and you pass a relatively simple test. And it's like, you can now own a gym and teach this philosophy and these movements. And some of these movements are like the highest physically demanding things that you could possibly do with a barbell. and all you need is that 2 days and then the amount of money to take the certification and pay for the affiliation. Now, I don't think that's the appropriate way for quality control. And I think for the affiliates that have been around for 10, 15 years, who definitely have super advanced and knowledgeable coaches, it's a good look for, somebody to be able to do that. Like, they could have a member in their gym who has no coaching experience, decide they want to take a level 1 and go and open a gym 500 feet away from them in a different studio in the same building as that company. And there's no quality control. There's no protection against that. Like, I think that's a problem for what happens and what could perpetuate downstream in terms of what people think about CrossFit. So having some level of quality control for the affiliate network, I think, needs to happen.
What's Greg's famous response to this that he always gives?
Yeah, I think it's just about like an open market system, and that the best of the best are going to be able to rise. And it's like the libertarian capitalism or whatever,
which is
he calls
true.
it.
But then going back to your issue of people getting hurt, because we used to travel and go to gyms all over the place, and that you'd see it. It's just like anything else. You go to the Chili's down the street and it's like, woo, they cook those crispers legit. Then you go to one across town and the Zios doesn't even work. They have to take your credit card to the back. The crispers were just mushy and gross. You're not sympathizing with me. Yeah. I'm finding this odd. The fries didn't have any seasoning on them. The corn wasn't buttered. No salt. It's like, who's working today?
I agree with you. I like
Ricky.
Chili's.
That's who.
Yeah, Ricky.
Fucking Ricky.
Ricky comes back again. That whole philosophy, I feel like it makes the most sense if you want to get the most affiliates possible. If you want to increase your affiliate network as big as you possibly can, you want the barrier to entry to open a gym to be as low as possible. Again, a good business decision. But in terms of what the affiliates that are already part of the network, who in large part are creating the brand. If you sum the influence of CrossFit HQ's media versus the influence of all of the top 20 percentile of most popular gyms and coaches in the realm of CrossFit, the 20% coaches probably have actually more influence on touching and training athletes and people with the methodology that they're putting out. And I think that protecting that will ultimately lead to better quality, better retention of those affiliations, and a better ability to upcharge and charge more money to potentially be an affiliate, and people would actually want to be an affiliate. Whereas I know a lot of people now, I feel like, use this as an opportunity to be like, well, I'm not really getting anything from my affiliation, so I'm just going to de-affiliate now because I've already built my brand, right? Like Training Think Tank, no one probably until this podcast knew I even had an affiliation. We don't have any of that on our websites because we don't need it. The brand itself stands as what we already built. And then that is more so that we can continue to be a part of the community and the culture. So some sort of quality control system, I guess that could kind of lead into some sort of success initiative. I know a lot of gyms, I think, don't really have an understanding of marketing, financial metrics and budgeting, pricing, equipment financing. I think there are so many things that, and this isn't, again, that's not even something that we need or we would need help with. It's just something that I think if you're trying to set up an affiliate network to create good coaches and thriving businesses, there should be some sort of a support on that side of the equation. And I know to open your gym, all you need to do is to take the level 1, and there is no support on that. It's should there be, if you're part of a CrossFit gym and you're doing CrossFit classes, should there be some sort of price control so that way you're not in a market where somebody's completely undercutting you and you then have to go into a price war? And again, I don't know if there's an answer to this, and maybe their affiliate network system can start to help with that because people can voice these opinions. But these are things I heard from affiliates. I've traveled to a lot of affiliates all over this country, in Canada, in Europe, and I've heard these issues over and over and over again. So it's almost like hey, I'm sharing these because I've heard them, less than they impact me personally.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what do you, what am I trying to ask? I want to say, why do you care? But that's not really what I mean. But like, why is this, it's not going to affect Training Think Tank, whether.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess in ways it does, but I'm curious, why do you care?
Yeah. This whole video, this whole like podcast, whatever we decide to do with this was not really necessarily about me trying to make something that serves TTT necessarily. I mean, I have a lot of ideas in my head that I want to vent and get out, but it's also because I know there's a lot of people that are out there that are looking for change in the culture, in the community. They're unhappy. They see things they don't like, but I don't think there are that many people that verbalize like, what are the specific changes that would actually make this culture and community better? And that was more like those first 2 bullet points with regards to the affiliate network were about, hey, if we do these things, we're going to have better business relationships in similar markets, as opposed to me thinking or, passion thinking of the 5 gyms that are around in this area as direct competition. It could be a much more collaborative culture, like where one gym might be focused more on sport performance and one might be focused more on elderly populations. And then if you get somebody to come in and you're like, hey, our gym is primarily a sport performance business, so like you might be better.
So get your old ass out of here.
Yeah. And that type of a relationship I think would happen much more regularly if the businesses were set up for success and they were making money and they didn't need every single possible person they could come in.
That just gives me a headache to even think about that. I'm glad that's not my problem to solve.
Same. All right. The other thing, and this one I think is more personal to me, is I think there needs to be some sort of a board or some sort of a group that is reviewing and supporting the training educational materials that are coming out from CrossFit. An upgraded understanding of energy systems, an involved understanding of movement training and how to actually improve somebody's ability to move, to do specific skills, a better way to organize strength training, helping people to understand how to prescribe AMRAPs and for time workouts in different ways that promote longevity and don't slam the same joints all day, every week.
How many level 1s have you done? 2?
2.
So 1 in 09, 1 recently?
Yeah, 1
Did you notice a growth from?
I definitely noticed some changes for the better, and I enjoyed my experience in the second one. I actually got a different perspective on how they taught it, but still the information that's in there is
well, I guess where I was leading is do you think they're going in the right direction? Do you think they're constantly adding to it, or you feel like they've got a lot of slack to pick up?
Yeah. I mean, based on just what I've read and what I've done and what the research that I've done and hearing people that are teaching in those seminars and what they're doing with regards to training and coaching people and their own research, I just think that there might not necessarily be that big of an emphasis on the expansion of training knowledge in the organization, and instead a focus on how to create the curriculum in a way that it's very easily to digest and very entertaining for the people in there, and giving them workouts. And I think that there just needs to be an upgrade. Now, some of that might come and being a level 2 or a level 3 or a level 4 coach. So unfair of me to say one way or the other, but I know that
you basic ass level 1.
Yeah.
I'll be coming on here
trying to.
Why don't you pay him some more money and learn the real shit? They ain't gonna give it to you in the level 1, dog.
Yeah.
Come on.
Get out of here with that. You just put me on the defense.
No, I know what you mean. But maybe it is in that other stuff.
Yeah. But I don't. That's the thing. That type of training knowledge is the stuff that will get more people into affiliates, that will create more longevity, that will create more bodies that reflect the culture. So if you're making that your proprietary information, that's the top-notch dollar that only your level 4 instructors know, then 85% of the people out there that are training CrossFit are doing it in a way that's probably not good, not healthy, not making people better, and they don't know where to go to get quality information to be able to help them. So I think that, yes, I'm only a level 1 and maybe all of it's in the level 2, 3, and 4. But I do think that there needs to be, as a culture, much more emphasis on the attainment of knowledge and wisdom through training, as opposed to a constant defense that we need to simplify it as much as possible and go intense and do it really hard in as many chaotic ways as possible. And I'm like, who's actually doing that? Who at the top level of the sport is actually just chaotically doing everything all the time and never thinking about what they do and how they're progressing things and what their weaknesses are and how to distribute
But that might be the question though. Are they talking about the sport? Or are they talking about classes?
Well, I mean, even if we're talking about classes, shouldn't the class structure be about broad, general, and inclusive fitness to be able to improve all of the 10 general skills and all the movement patterns? And you look at most CrossFit gym affiliate box programs, and it's like, we do a strength and it has a barbell progression, and we do that 5 days a week. We do a Metcon, and that Metcon ranges from 5 to 20 minutes. And then maybe you do a cool down, or maybe do a couple accessory pieces. We're missing a lot of things with regards to the ideology of how do we lay out these programs? How do we scale them and adjust them for different levels of people? How do we use intervals to be able to do this? And maybe CrossFit thinks, hey, this never should be a part of your training. It's like, all right, well, you can think that, but there's pretty much everybody in the training sphere who's doing the sport, who's in the affiliates, is writing workouts and constructing them in a way that does this. So I think there's then a disconnect between how HQ is perceiving the best way to train according to the methodology and the bulk of people that are actually trying to do training to aspire to the methodology.
Yeah.
So again, it's still a communication issue. How do we review the educational process and contribute to that and discuss it and discuss when things might not be good and when intensity might not be the answer without feeling like you're dissenting against the way that you have to do things? I think it's just a discussion that needs to be had from
them being open to hearing from the rest of the community.
Yeah, for sure. And them maybe providing a more deep level of education and bringing the CrossFit Journal back and putting out articles on on more advanced topics so that coaches can continue their educational process. And in that education, potentially networking outside of their internal subject matter experts. I mean, I think that was originally the concept is, hey, let's take the best of everything from all these different
those
fields.
were fun days.
Yeah, I mean, it was.
When they went and visited Louis.
Yeah, it was really good. I love that. And then the last thing is just communication. It seems like they're working on that. It's they're starting that whole affiliate network that's segmented by regions, but I think there needs to be a PR system. There needs to be somebody who's in charge of PR that talks about the sport, and that person probably needs to be separate for somebody that actually supports the affiliate network, or they just have two different press releases, one that's specific to the sport, so that we know what's going on. Like, when is the season? How is the season being planned? What's the structure of it? Could we potentially reduce the open to 3 weeks instead of 5 weeks? I don't think we need to take 5 weeks out of the year to do 5 tests.
Those last two.
Oh man, it's hard just to, it's hard to endure the constant frustration of just doing those tests, where you could probably give the elite athletes, hey, you have a week to do these 5 tests. And all of the affiliates would probably be on board with that. Be like,
Fraser does them all in 20 minutes and still comes out.
Yeah. But again, I think this is the communication. It needs to be a two-way street. There needs to be some sort of a system back and forth that we can make these types of changes. So, all right. That's what I think needs changing.
Wow, man, you have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, I do. Honestly though, we give power to people and organizations by sharing their ideas, wearing their apparel, attending their events. So I support CrossFit, and my organization has been supported by me supporting CrossFit and being involved in CrossFit. I know that I can withdraw my support. So I could remove my affiliation. I can not attend CrossFit events, and I could have just not put this up and not said anything. Why I don't want to do that at the moment is because on the affiliate side, I want to see what changes they're going to make, because I do love a lot of people in the culture that are CrossFit affiliates that are still trying to see if the changes are going to be made in a positive way. And then on the sports side, I have athletes that I've coached that are like brothers and sisters to me that have been involved in this for a long time and dedicated thousands of hours of training to try to be elite at this and make a living. And I want to support them. So if they're like, hey, I want to see what types of changes are made, then I want to be a part of that. If changes aren't made, so if the only change is this information that we've gotten out, then over time, I probably will, and I'm assuming other people will probably not renew their affiliation, slowly reorganize the business so I'm not supporting the sport. If other people come out and do a similar sport that's not called CrossFit, I might start
if that's the case, that will happen.
Yeah,
the sport is not going anywhere. It just might be something else.
For sure. I mean, that's already happening. It's just like, will it happen on the scale of the games that quickly, or are we going to be in like a regression and then build back up type thing? I'm not really entirely sure. So that's kind of where I am, because I know you said I had a lot of thoughts, and a lot of them are critical or criticisms. I wanted to end with the things I love about CrossFit. It's really two things. And the first is just the ideology. It truly makes me fired up, both as a coach, as an athlete, as a business owner. The process of trying to get good at as many physical skills as I possibly can, and being prepared for having to do something super intense and short, or moderate duration and pretty intense, or long and slow for hours and hours and hours, is something that makes me feel more capable as a human being. And I think getting that aspect of training dialed in so that my body and mind is almost always ready to move forward with whatever task life presents me has been something that has changed me as a human being and influenced my understanding of physical training. But that being said, CrossFit doesn't really own those training principles. Even the information that you find in some of Glassman's best literature can be traced back to training texts from other people that predate whatever he was released. So it's like, well, that's not really owned. The ideology is not necessarily owned. Maybe some of the phrasing and the term CrossFit and some of that stuff is owned by them. And then the second thing is the people that I've come into contact with, whether they're people in the media, whether they're people that love it and judge, whether they're fans, whether they are athletes that I coach, whether they're other coaches that coach athletes, or whether they're other coaches that are just coaching people to get more fit and also believe in the ideology. Those people that I've been connected to feel like some sort of professional connected family. And when I think about both of those two things, I'm like, oh, it doesn't really matter what's going to happen with CrossFit. We together can build a better tomorrow for this entire thing, for the sport, for the organization. Now, really, the pressure is on CrossFit to prove that they're going to make the changes so that they are part of whatever comes in the future. And we make the decision as to whether we support them in that, because they're willing to make a change with all the pressure that's being put in the market. So that's kind of where my head's at. Those are all of my thoughts with regards to changes. And
those aren't all of your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I got more, but that's enough. That's all I got written down.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. Everyone, thank you for listening.
Maybe we could, because I mean, I would hate for people to just hear this and be like, it's criticism, because I know behind the scenes here, we always have ideas. And I know ideas are like assholes, but
opinions are like assholes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. Opinions, ideas too.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone can have an idea, but the fact is that y'all are people who have been doing it for a long time. You care, I think, is the point, and you have thoughts, and so it's not just you. I hear you. It might come off like complaining or like, hey, you should do this, but there's thoughts, and if anyone's open to ever hearing his thoughts, shoot him an email.
Max at trainingthinktank.com.
And you're not even saying you want to be the one involved, just some sort of board. I mean, the key thing I keep hearing is like a board. That seems to stick out as like just something, some.
I mean, truthfully, I don't think I would actually want to be a part of that.
No one would want to.
I mean, if I was called to action and somebody said, hey, we need your opinion, we need you to help with X. If I feel like, hey, this is my role and I'm really good at this one thing, because I'm a pretty specific
let's put you on the spot. Castro calls you up. Hey, dog, heard that podcast. That shit was fire.
Yeah, probably won't happen.
I need you on my board. What are you going to provide?
I'm going to be the person everyone can make fun of. I mean, I think the training education would probably be the thing that I would be most unbiased to be able to provide, because
no, for the sport. That would be for the affiliates, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, I can't really be involved. This is one of my problems with this whole thing is like, you have people that are current athletes that are putting themselves up as like, hey, I'm going to be part of the athlete union and be the representative. I'm like, well, that might be a little unbiased. You might need somebody else to represent it. And I don't think for me as an active coach or for the athletes as active athletes, I think if I were going to do that, I would have to step out of the role of coaching Noah and Travis and anybody that's at that level to truly be able to give unbiased perspectives. I think I would be involved, and I would love, if there is a board, to just go in and be able to say like, all right, here are my thoughts here. This is what you're doing. Here's my opinion of it. But I think there are certain things that need to be withheld from people that are active participants. So this is more of a thing like, hey, this is your problem, and you are the people that need to fix this to have the support of your own athletes and your own coaches and your own affiliate network that you're losing trust with over time.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yep. Young sport, still working on it.
Yeah.
Let's just get the ball rolling a little quicker.
I think this will probably be the first time I felt like we've actually regressed as a sport. I mean, up until this point, I feel like a lot of things were moving in the right direction in terms of growth. I think really the change last year to the format of the season and the reduction of all the investment into the sport was
the change.
Yeah,
the curb stomp.
Which was that? Oh yeah, that was probably the first time I thought there was a regression. I thought things were swooping back up. And then now with what's going on from a leadership perspective, I feel like, all right, this is a big worry. It's not a worry that I think the sport's going to survive, because I think, like we talked about, it's just going to go elsewhere. Yeah. But I don't know if that's the best move. I think I would like the affiliate network and CrossFit to be involved, even if they're just the CrossFit Games and they're one of the primary events that run the whole, and other people have their own independent things. Yeah. But I'm not really 100% sold that they need to be like kicked out of the thing that they cultivated and grew, because there's a lot of people in that network that would have a lot of valuable stuff to offer, way more than I would have with regards to event organization, because I've never done it.
Sure haven't.
Yeah.
And I hope you never do.
All right, friends. Thank you for listening. That's my thoughts. If you have any hate emails, send them to Chris. If you have any love emails, send them to me.